The Senate will come to order. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bill be made for special order for immediate consideration. Members, the sheet is on your desk. It's the Omnibus State Government Finance and Policy Bill.
The bill up for consideration is number 4 on general order, Senate file to Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Glad to be with you today in presenting Senate File 2, State Government Policy, Finance, and Elections Committee bill. So appreciate the opportunity to bring this before you, but to just remind you, though, that probably about a month ago or so, state government also brought a bill to this Senate floor, which did many good things in that bill as well. So just to recognize some of those things that were done previously but are tied to this particular bill are some smaller things. They were smaller policy things, but still deserve mention. The Capital Flag Program, retired canines to the handler, Minnesota IT renaming it to an agency, blue ribbon policy put into place, many Secretary of State technical provisions for local government, and others that are very important but are details that we were able to cover, so we really appreciate that. And a number of things also for the Campaign Finance Board, and that was done previously, but I thought it's important to include that and mention because when we deal with state government, the recognition is that it's one committee, it's one bill. And so what you have before you today is largely the appropriations bill. And so for the appropriations bill today, we focused on meeting basic needs of the agencies that support the people of Minnesota. So the Department of Revenue, Department of Administration, Minnesota Management and Budget. It also includes the legislature and the Legislative Coordinating Commission, which includes the Legislative Budget Office, the Revisor's Office, and many of these other branches that serve both the House and the Senate. So we're very glad that we are able to have those in this bill today. There were some programs that others wanted that are not in this bill, but we do have those that many did want and are within this bill today. And I think it's important to just recognize that in this bill as well, there are several articles. So in particular, the appropriations article, we stayed within target. Matter of fact, state government was under target in its spending in regards to this particular bill. In addition to that, we also had an article that had to do with military and veterans affairs that was included in this particular bill. So in this bill, you will see veterans restorative justice language is included in this bill. In addition to that, in both the appropriations and some in policy, there is funding for the new Veterans Cemetery in Chippewa Falls, and that is fully funded in this bill to $4.5 million. In addition, the veterans' homes, the maintenance required by federal rules is included in this bill, including ongoing maintenance, which is a requirement of federal rules. So all 3 of those new veterans' homes that are in Preston, Montevideo, and in Bemidji are taken care of as far as construction. They also are funded in regards to maintenance and continuing to operate as we do have other veterans' homes. So while our veterans have taken care of us, I am looking out and helping to take care of our veterans in these stages of their life where they need a nursing home or in their last time of life when they might need a final resting place. In addition to that, we funded some homelessness, additional money for veterans. We took care of some respite camps, in particular Camp Bliss, and some other ones as well. There's several of those that are within this bill today. So I think in the military veterans bill, thank you to Senator Lang, Senator Anderson, Senator Howe, in particular our veterans here in the Senate, and how much we appreciate their work and their effort on behalf of our veterans. In regards to other articles of the bill, we do have one that have some election changes. In particular of note, that we have an annual report on post-election sampling by February 15th. We also have some absentee ballot drop box security and integrity and recording and monitoring required. Those are important areas of consideration that we came to agreement on. Also, considering this year is a redistricting year, we have Minnesota state law that requires local governments to establish polling places by December 31st of the year prior. In this particular bill, because of redistricting, we're allowing an exemption to that just for the redistricting year, so that as lines are redrawn, they will be able to serve the voters of their local jurisdictions. And in regards to some other areas as well, requiring several sections of all records and materials stored in a locked container, other secured and locked spaces, repeated several times, very important. And in the case of a constitutional amendment, and we have a need for a recount, there's new rules and new law in place for that, which is not been addressed before, so glad to include it here today. Article 5 has to do with federal funds, and this is agreed upon language by leadership, in which we are able to fund through the federal language and through the agreement, put it into written language here in Article 5 of, or in this particular bill that we have today. We also have in Article 5 federal funds maximization, which requires that the commissioner can go through, and if there are general fund appropriations that could be paid for with the federal money, the commissioner has permission to do that. So those are some of the highlights that we have today in the state government bill. I know there are many materials there available for your review. And with that, Mr. President, it's a good bill. I ask for a yes vote, and I will be glad to answer any questions. And Mr. President, before I go further, though, I just want to be sure and thank my staff, Joey Wiley, Alec Bjorn, Christina Wilson, Emily Novotny, Andrew Erickson, Stephanie James, Alexa Stengel, Joan White, a variety of others that were supportive to them as well. And as you know, members, we don't ever bring a bill to the floor in this particular case without all the able support of our staff. So thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion on Senate file to Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I have the A6 amendment, and Mr. President, I'd like a roll call.
Senator Gazelka offers the
A6.
A6 amendment. The secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Gazelka moves to amend Senate File Number 2 as follows, page 35 after line 9. Insert. This is the A6 amendment.
A roll call will be granted to the amendment. Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, there's a couple parts to this. The first one is related to the COVID penalties. That it refers to Chapter 12 and says that all penalties cannot be more than what Chapter 12 stated, a $1,000 fine and a misdemeanor. So that means that the fines would be reduced to those amount, licenses would be restored as we're getting back to normal. And then the second part, I think, is even more important, and that is this ends the governor's emergency powers. And I think that's it's really important for our state as we move forward. This is a legislative prerogative. I will tell you that the governor and I do not agree on this. This is not a surprise. I've been saying this is going to be coming on the state government bill. The governor just recently announced, as he knew that we were going to do this, that he would go to August 1st. But what I need to say, members, is 15 states plus the District of Columbia have already completely ended emergency powers. That doesn't count places like South Dakota or Iowa that had very, very little use of the emergency powers from the first place. But there's 9 GOP governors: Alaska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Ohio, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts. But there's also 6 Democrat governors or mayor: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, and New York. And then another 3 states are about to do it. 19 states are still hanging on. Governors in 19 states are still hanging on, and the emergency is over, and the powers must be released. This is a legislative prerogative, members, and just so you know, I've said it before, but a number of us here, Democrat, Republican, went to a meeting with over 70 state legislative leaders from around the country. We got together. The number one issue was emergency powers and the abuse of them nationwide. 300 bills this year alone to reform them, and that'll be a day for another discussion on another day. As you're aware, I submitted the language for a constitutional amendment that reforms those, but that's for next year. This year, it's ending the emergency powers now, and I know that this has been long and stressful for everyone, whether you liked it or didn't like it. Every governor had this responsibility. Some did it better, some did it worse. But as you think about what we went through in the very, very beginning time, a year ago March, just before that, immediately there was $500 million that we came together for PPE, the personal protection equipment, making sure there was enough beds in the hospitals, getting ready for this surge. It never came, the surge that never came. And based on that data or science, the governor said that 40,000 to 50,000 people would die in Minnesota if everyone was sheltered at home. Not if they weren't, if they were. And I remember that's where the divide started to happen, and that's where emergency powers became a problem, because he didn't have to listen to the legislative branch. At that very same time, I said that we should shelter at home only seniors, because that's where most of the deaths were occurring, but that did not happen. We did not do that. And so we began to divide in what each side believed, but there was no ability for the legislators to have the input to say, we don't agree with that. We don't agree that schools should be closed and that students cannot be in school the entire school year this year, half the prior year. We didn't agree with that, but we could not stop that. We did not agree that kids had to have masks even after the CDC said it was not dangerous, all the way till the graduation this year. We did not agree that that business should be shut down and churches should be shut down. In fact, churches had to threaten going to court for that to be lifted. But there was just many, many decisions that I truly believe if that had been a legislative branch working it out with the governor, we would have got to a better place. But that didn't happen, members. And so here we are today, nobody in the beds, very, very, very low infection rates, and no need to keep this. Now, I know the governor has said, well, I could still get SNAP benefits in August and September. Members, through the three stimulus bills, one from Trump, two from Biden, over $18 billion of extra money came into Minnesota. Eventually, you got to say, look, we don't want all the strings from the federal government. We are responsible as Minnesotans to chart our path. And so, members, it's time. That's not the reason for him to hang on to the emergency powers. We've settled the eviction moratorium that allowed people to get free rent for over 16 months. We settled that one. There's nothing left but to end them. So, members, I would encourage you to vote for this. You don't have to, but I want you to know this is a Democrat and Republican issue across the country. Legislative branches saying this is not how it should be. And then roll up your sleeves with me next year and let's do emergency power reforms that we can have set into the future so that whenever the next election is after the next governor, that it's done differently. So, members, I would encourage a green vote.
Discussion on the A6 amendment. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I stood up here yesterday and talked about how well the Senate had been working together in trying to get a budget passed, good dialogue, partnership, and I believe that what we're seeing here flies in the face of that. I have a copy of a letter that was sent by Joe Kelly, the Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management here in Minnesota, to Senator Gazelka yesterday, and he outlines a few few of the issues that are still outstanding. He specifically refers to staff redeployment and reorganization, some issues, we're still dealing with capacity issues on unemployment insurance through deed, and then as we have continued to bring up, Senator Frentz over months has brought up the issue of the SNAP benefits, which represent $40 million to the state of Minnesota per month. Important nutritional support for people, Minnesotans experiencing food insecurity, and that remains an issue as well. The governor has said he has the roadmap to end emergency powers on August 1st because of these issues. He also reminds us that these issues were shared with Senators Benson, Johnson, and Pratt on April 15th, and they remain. So I would, if Senator Gazelka would yield, I'd like to ask him a question.
He will yield. Senator Kent.
Senator Gazelka, is the A6 amendment, is that agreed upon as a part of, I'm not a part of the conversations. We've tried to be good partners on what you tell us and what the governor's office and the speaker tell us. Is this part of the global agreement?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Kent, this is the one area that there is not agreement, and what I would say is this is not the governor's decision of when the legislative branch determines that he does not need emergency powers, which is why I said that we have over 15 states, Republican and Democrat, saying, Governor of those states, it's time to give up these powers. And that's why I'll also mention that after we've already received $18 billion from the federal government allowing these emergency powers, that eventually there's a time where it's not good for the governor to hang on to powers that are meant to be shared with the legislative branch. Many of those other states didn't use the powers to close down schools or to close down businesses or force mask mandates instead of suggesting them, not letting kids making kids wear masks while playing sports. There were so many decisions, not kicking people out of the places they were renting, but not helping the people that owned it. There was many decisions that should have been done together. And we're just saying you should not keep hanging on to these and then have these broad powers. This is not changing Chapter 12 emergency powers. That, I believe, will be done next year if we can all work together. But I've been communicating this with the governor, that this is not his to tell us when emergency powers end, but for the legislative branch to tell the governor when the emergency powers end.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as we have reminded members of this body as well as others, we are one part of one branch of the legislative branch of government. So I appreciate you can offer this amendment. I also appreciate that there are still issues to be discussed and resolved. I don't know what has gone on in all those other states you mentioned. You mentioned Wisconsin. That was overturned by a partisan court a long time ago. They've maybe been able to work on their off-ramps. We still, in this body, haven't passed the eviction off-ramp. Don't know why. We heard that a week ago in the Finance Committee, but we still haven't heard the housing bill in the Minnesota Senate yet, and not sure what's up with that. The governor it sounds like he is making a good faith effort to work to wind these down as quickly as possible with the least amount of disruption. Everything that you just listed, schools, businesses, and on and on and on, those executive orders have absolutely all been rescinded. We are now down to some very basic nuts and bolts sort of things and some important funding to the state of Minnesota that we should be able to work together for one additional month so that we can wind these down in a responsible, thoughtful way. So members, I would absolutely encourage you to oppose the A6 amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Gazelka, for opening the discussion about emergency powers. I think it's worth reviewing some of the points that have already been made on the floor here, what has happened during this emergency. And I remind members that when a hurricane causes an emergency, the emergency isn't over when the rain stops. The emergency is over when we're back to normal. And I'll be a no vote on this resolution, and here's why. First of all, what's the quality of work that the governor of the state of Minnesota has done with the emergency powers? Well, we have now the ability to look back, and here's a couple things I hope we keep an eye on. Number one, a fatality rate that the state should be proud of. The governor's emergency powers saved thousands of Minnesota lives. Look at the comparison of the fatality rate to South Dakota and North Dakota, just as an example. Second, just announced, the gross domestic product for the state of Minnesota in the first quarter, 7.5%. 8th in the country. Our economy is coming back stronger than ever, and those emergency powers were used to help businesses, help consumers, help working men and women get us to this point where we'll be back stronger than ever. Economy and public health. Those are two pretty important uses for emergency powers. But what the resolution says, as I understand it, is we can't have emergency powers in Minnesota end on August 1st. It has to be July 1st. I think Minnesotans will reject that. I think we're coming out of the pandemic in a way that looks responsible and confident. And I second Senator Kent's concern about the eviction moratorium. We have not passed it yet, and we have landlords in Tennessee emailing each one of us constantly saying, when are we going to get this thing passed so that we can wind down that emergency power? Homeland Security writes a letter. What about emergency powers? Be careful of these items. SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits, of course, Mr. President, go to low-income Minnesotans and supports our farmers. So I'm a little concerned when we act like it's not a big deal to get that roughly $40 million a month. But at the end of my remarks, I will just point out, when we look at what other states are doing, as Senator Gazelka noted, 35 states still have emergency powers, and I'd ask if the majority of American states have remained in emergency powers and kept the peacetime emergency, what do they know that we don't know? Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the amendment, Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Frentz, I think every state wanted their governor to be successful over this. And as we look back, we're going to be looking at all the details and saying who did actually do it better. Frankly, when the governor said 50,000 people would die, even if we sheltered everybody at home, I went back to my quotes a year ago March, and I had written to somebody, I think unfortunately we'll lose about 5,000 Minnesotans, mostly over 70. Well, the number was awfully close to that if you look at the end of last December. So the decisions that we made based on these catastrophic predictions based on, quote, science, were just flat out wrong. And if you look at some of the states, look at Wisconsin versus Minnesota. They didn't have the mask mandates, the restrictions were not as great. You can't tell the difference between the two on the virus. So it wasn't just about the virus, though, and protecting our public, which we all agreed was important. It was, what do we do to make sure our kids get a great education, and they did not. What do we do to make sure that businesses are surviving? Well, you know, the PPP really helped some people, and other people it did not. And what do we do about people's mental health? I've never seen people so angry, both sides of the aisle, as I've seen right now. And I can't help but think some of it had to do with the fact that we took away some people's liberty without trusting them to do these things. But these were scary times, without a doubt. And every governor had to make the decision, and some were good and some were bad. But now is the time to end it, members, just so we get back to the place we should be.
Further discussion on the A6 amendment, Senator Marty.
Mr. President, we've heard a lot of discussion about Section 23 of this amendment and not much about the first part, so I'd like to divide it after line 1.15.
The Secretary will report Senator Marty's motion to divide the amendment.
Senator Marty moves to divide the amendment as follows. The first amendment would be through 1.15. The second amendment would be 1.16 to 1.23.
And the author of the amendment gets to choose which section of the amendment we'll vote on first.
Repeat that.
Senator Gazelka, you get to choose if you want to, since Senator Marty divided the amendment, it's your choice if we vote on the first part or the second part.
I'll take the first part.
I'm going to have you just announce what's on the... I'm going to have the secretary just announce the portion of the amendment that we're going to vote on.
The amendment before us will be pages 1.1 to 1.15, the section 22 portion of the amendment.
Mr. President, could I ask for a roll call?
Senator Limmer, a roll call has been requested. Roll call will be granted. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the first part of it, I'm interested, we're saying that any violation, no matter how serious it is, a willful violation, we're not going to allow a fine to be better than $1,000 or a penalty more than a misdemeanor. And it does, that's puzzling to me, because when we're dealing with public health, we have very powerful problems when people spread infections. I think this has been a problem throughout history. We've had strong quarantine authority for Department of Health in case of infectious diseases and so on. And the idea that no penalty is going to have more than $1,000 and misdemeanor penalty, no matter how a willful violation of something putting your neighbors at risk, I really question why we're really so eager to make penalties light on people who put others' lives at risk. And Senator Gazelka, you're welcome to comment on that, but you may be saying, I don't like the fact that the governor's got an emergency order, but you're basically saying people who willfully violate the law, put others at risk, no matter how serious the violation, they can't get anything more than a misdemeanor. And I just think that's a mistake, but I'd welcome your response.
Mr. President.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, members, Senator Marty, part of it has to do with following Chapter 12, and if we want to clear that up in the future as we look at some of these things related to the pandemic, that's fine. But I initially was going to, frankly, just waive all the penalties because it was so difficult for many businesses and they struggled to get through it across the country. And other states have completely waived these penalties as an acknowledgement of the difficulty that they had to go through. But I settled on going back to Chapter 12 and simply saying you still have to follow the law, but it should be based on the $1,000 fine and the misdemeanor.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Marty.
Mr. President, Senator Gazelka, that's talking about the people who are violating it and the concern for them. I guess I have maybe even more concern for the other businesses that are complying with the law, who find out their competitors are violating the law and getting a competitive advantage for that. You're saying, well, we don't care if you took advantage of others. Those who follow the rules, they must be suckers. We don't care what happens to them. If somebody else gets more business because they're violating the rules, that's not appropriate. And I think it's a really unfair thing to say that those who are breaking the rules, you're really concerned about the hardship on them, but not concerned about their competitor businesses who are following the rules.
Mr. President, just briefly.
Further discussion. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you. Before Senator Matthews, actually this is partly about the governor following the rules and a $1,000 fine and a misdemeanor. It acknowledges that they were doing something that shouldn't have been done under executive orders, but it's making the point about the scope of what the governor had for resources.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I rise in favor of this portion of the amendment because this is exactly what the governor should have been doing to follow the law. We found out, as he so clearly was mistaken so many times along the way in this pandemic, that when Chapter 12 put a level in saying, here's the maximum penalty that you can have under under executive orders issued under emergency powers, the governor came along and decided in some of his emergency orders to set a higher penalty right in them without any input from the legislature, and clearly unconstitutional because it's not the prerogative of the executive branch to decide to set what penalties you have for laws that the executive sets himself. And so we had state agencies, multiples of them, running around, shutting down businesses, and putting extreme and severe fines and penalties that went way beyond what state law says to do. That was dead wrong. And how do I know this? To Senator Marty and others, because some of them were my constituents that called me wondering what they were going to do. People that had barely hung on from the virus, had barely hung on from the emergency powers, and were fearful of being sunk by the extreme penalties that were in violation of the law. That's why you saw so many of us fired up on this floor fighting for people that were being destroyed by these emergency orders, because one man doesn't get to set what the law is and then set extreme penalties for breaking that law. This absolutely needs to be passed, and I urge every single member, support your constituents and vote green on this portion of the amendment.
Discussion on the divided amendment. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have had countless conversations about the coronavirus and COVID on this floor. Once in a while, when I read newspaper articles about me, people will define me or refer to me as a former nurse. But I am a registered nurse. I teach, and my license is required, so I am a registered nurse, and I'm just one of two healthcare providers, licensed healthcare providers. Wait, three. There are three of us serving in this body, and there are four. Dr. Abler, Chris Eaton, Dr. Klein, and myself. There are four healthcare providers that serve in this body. So I have restrained myself when I have heard particularly the majority leader of this body describe the experience that we have shared since the start of the global pandemic. And particularly, I have restrained myself when I've heard him describe the fact that the majority of people who died from coronavirus and COVID were in nursing homes and were senior citizens. There were 7,654 people in the state of Minnesota who have died. Every single one of those people count. Every one of them. Whether they're in a nursing home or in a hospital or in their own home. And that loss of life permeates the state of Minnesota to this day. And while I am grateful to see what looks like a virus in retreat, the risk of COVID still exists, especially for kids under 12 who are not able to get vaccinated. And for those people who are choosing not to get vaccinated, with the emergence of the Delta virus, we could see an uptick in the disease that is caused by the virus. That is the nature of a public health crisis. And while, as Senator Gazelka said, we did not agree, and I agree with you, there has been an unfortunate and destructive disagreement over the state of our health and well-being as a result of this virus. We did not agree. Guess what? The science is on my side. The science is on the side of the providers. And so while we are having a political debate right now about the ramifications of the choices that people made, including elected officials, we cannot debate the science. And for everyone who has been harmed, everyone, including the constituents represented by Senator Matthews, people were harmed by the virus. And every time I hear someone assert that it was emergency powers or the action of government that was the harm, I want to say, look at what we have experienced. The harm that we have suffered to our economy, to our well-being, to our families, to our health care providers, the trauma, the mental health, All of that is the result of a virus. We are 6 days away from a government shutdown, and here we are one more time having a debate about the science of this virus. I think that is incredibly unfortunate. And so to this amendment, Senator Gazelka, I'm wondering if you would yield to a question.
Senator Gazelka will yield for a question. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senator Gazelka, Section 22 is titled Rollback of Pandemic-Related Fines and Penalties and Licensure Reinstatements. I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit more about why you think this is important and what your intention is.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Murphy, it has to do with holding the governor accountable to going farther than what the fines and penalties and actions that he could do related to that. And then secondarily, an acknowledgement that these businesses and groups that were gone after because they didn't require the mask mandates or they didn't do 6 feet of social distancing, that they get some relief from that. And I was going to ask you to yield as well. I'm just wondering how that works here, Mr. President, but I would like to do that as well.
Let's hold off on that. Well, Senator Murphy has the floor. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would Senator Gazelka continue to yield?
He will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Gazelka, so in the honest disagreement that we have about the virus and its impacts on people, do you agree or disagree that when businesses like the Alibi Bar in Lakeville decided to defy orders, executive orders, and open up and not mask, do you agree or disagree that that served as a point of transmission for the virus?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Murphy, first of all, I'll say that's why I left the violations in place instead of removing them completely, because you do need to follow the laws that are there. So that's how I approach that.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if Senator Gazelka would continue to yield.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, President Miller. And Senator Gazelka, my question, though, is about whether or not you believed the violation of those orders served to further transmit the deadly virus.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Murphy, frankly, I don't know for sure. There were large gatherings of protests that I have no idea whether there was that they could trace maximum spread for that or not. To me, it was about following the law. I've asked the governor to follow the law, and I asked people to follow the law, and then what the penalties should be as a result of violating it. Even if it's an executive order, what was the penalty supposed to be? That is what the fine should have been.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, President Miller. And if Senator Gazelka would continue to yield.
He will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much. And there's a part of me that wants to ask a question about whether or not this amendment is rooted in just the sheer frustration that you feel with the governor. But I guess that's probably an unfair question. It does seem that the sheer frustration is probably a part of this, especially because the time difference between what I think the governor has said today and what is in this amendment is different. It's not a big difference. It's a month or so. And I understand that you are right now arguing for legislative authority. But it does, since I have been elected and serving in this body, this has been a frequent conversation. And I understand and appreciate that you're frustrated. But I won't put that question to you. The other question that I have for you is your wisdom, if you would, Senator Gazelka, share with me the wisdom of your thinking about after a violation has been committed, which has happened, for instance, at the Alibi Bar in Lakeville. After that violation is committed, as a legislative body, is it common that we would decide to reduce that penalty? Is that a common act on the part of the legislature to say, well, there was a emergency, a crisis, if you will. I think it was a crisis, a public health crisis. And there were people knowingly violating the executive orders, which from my perspective as a nurse and someone who understands science and has science on her side in the course of a global pandemic and the way this infection is transmitted. So is it typical for a legislative body like this one to say they violated that, they put the health of the public at risk? I think if we look back, we would see contact tracing that showed that there was further transmission. Is it typical for a legislative body then to say, despite those violations, we're gonna seek to waive the penalties for those businesses that essentially broke the law?
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Murphy, I think you interpret it incorrectly. We are actually the body that makes the laws, and we expect the governor to keep the laws, not to expand them just because he has emergency powers to do differently than what the statute says. So it has nothing to do with waiving or reducing the fines, but actually enforcing what the fine should have been in the first place.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and Senator Gazelka. See, I have served in legislative bodies for some time, and I remember after Philando Castile was killed and there were protests, one in particular, a cousin of mine attended, went down onto Interstate 94. I remember it caused a lot of concern, and after that I saw a rash of pieces of legislation introduced to raise the penalties for people who were peacefully protesting. We've seen that over and over again coming from Republicans who, when they are unhappy about a protest, they raise the penalty, they lift the threat, they say that behavior is dangerous and we want to punish it with a higher penalty. And so when I think about Section 22 of your amendment, is that right? When I think about your amendment and this section, Senator Gazelka, what I see is a willingness to turn a blind eye to the danger that was caused by those who willfully chose to violate the orders, the executive orders, those things that were meant to keep people safe in the middle of an emergency, a public health crisis, turning a blind eye to that and saying that's okay, and it's not that big of a deal, the health of the public and the families connected to those 7,654 people who died, and all of the suffering that we've experienced. It's okay that they chose to violate, to protest. That's not a big deal to us. That is a pretty significant departure from the behavior that we have seen coming from Republicans. It's a pretty significant departure from that message that I keep hearing coming from you, that we're supposed to follow the law, obey the law, respect the law. But in this case, because it doesn't suit your fancy, we want to waive the law. We want to waive the penalty. We want to walk away. We want to say it was okay.
Point of order,
to put
Mr.
the
President.
health of the public.
Senator Matthews, please state your point of order.
Mr. President, I believe that was invoking personalities and assigning motives in the debate, which is improper under Senate rules, and I'd ask you to advise Senator Murphy and the body to not do that to another member.
Members, just a reminder, we do not impugn the motives of other members on the Senate floor. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I appreciate that, Senator Matthews. I do. But this is a very serious issue. And while I don't intend to impugn anybody's motives, I do think it is important that we are crystal clear about what is being debated today, and that we are clear about the arguments that we are making about following the law, about obeying the law, about respecting the law, when it suits us and when it doesn't. And I believe this amendment is a contradiction in the positioning of the Republicans who have been for this entire session talking about law and order. I'm going to vote against this, both sections of this. I wish that we would get back to the work of balancing the budget and get this work done before there's a government shutdown. Thank you.
Members, just a reminder, Senator Marty has called for the A6 amendment to be divided. We are on section 1.1 to 1.15 of the amendment right now. Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, just a couple things I just want clarity there because Senator Murphy talked about if we notice something where there's abuse and we come back and we increase the penalties, that is done by legislation. That is done by legislation. Not in this case where legislation had the guidance, $1,000 fine and misdemeanor, and the governor decided to do it above legislation. So we're actually following the law. We're not turning a blind eye. We're just not saying the governor under emergency powers can do anything but what that chapter tells us he can do. And if we need to come back next year and work on that as we go through reforms, we should do that. And I won't ask for a question, but the science of kids under 12 being at risk from COVID, it clearly says that they are not at risk. It is a very, very, very small percentage. The number of kids under age 12 that have died from COVID is very, very small. Super, super serious. No matter who it is, when you lose a loved one, of which I did, it's very, very serious. But when we make laws and make determinations to shut down entire school systems in Minnesota because of this and cause them to lose a full year of education, I think we made a huge mistake there.
Further discussion on the divided amendment. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I thank Senator Marty for separating these out so that we can really talk about Section 22 and what it means. You know, Mr. President, when I came here in January and the new senators, we were all sworn in. Before I came, we were in the heat of the pandemic. We were really in the midst of it. And in Duluth, in my Senate district, anywhere you went in public, people were masked. They were very respectful. People were following the law. Businesses were following the orders and the law because we believe in the science and we believe in our public health apparatus and that we're going to stand up for one another. We're going to take care of each other. So you can imagine my surprise when I arrived at the Minnesota Senate to be sworn in, and I'm standing in line with colleagues, and some of them are wearing masks and others aren't, in blatant disregard of the public health recommendations, and in disregard really for my health and the health of my family and the health of their colleagues and their families. We had colleagues here in the Senate over the course of the spring who didn't feel safe coming to the building because of the disregard that was being shown by some members of this body. And now we have here an amendment that really what it does is provide some special treatment under the law. That's exactly what this does. And again, I'm really glad that we're having it separated out so we can talk about this. So intervening as this body to say, you know, we think the law is not appropriate. We're going to change it and make it misdemeanors. And if you had your license revoked because of disobeying the law during the pandemic, well, doesn't matter. We're going to give you special treatment. That's wrong. The other thing that is not really been acknowledged yet in the debate, I think, is that we have a balance of powers in our government. So first off, the legislature did give the governor the power to declare a public health emergency. There is a law that allows him to do it, that sets out how it's done. And we can have debate about those laws, but we also have a judiciary. We have courts. Have the courts found that the law has been disobeyed? No. We have courts to hear these things. We have laws. That is the law. And we had Minnesotans all throughout this state, in all of our districts, who followed the law. They had to shut their businesses temporarily to protect their neighbors, and they did, even though it was hard. Some people didn't. And they have to suffer the consequences of those actions under the law. And now I see the so-called party of law and order coming in and saying, oh, no, don't worry about that. We'll forgive that. That's not a problem. Unbelievable. You know, just to bring us back to the seriousness of what we're dealing with, today's COVID-19 report from our public health officials in the state of Minnesota states that we have lost 7,572 Minnesotans to the pandemic. 7,572 people. This is just more continuation, Mr. President and colleagues. This is more continuation of science denial. This is more continuation of diminishing the seriousness of what we faced as a state, as a community this past year. Well, I say, I'm not okay with giving special treatment to certain businesses and people who were in denial and as a result put their neighbors and their communities at risk. That is not okay. So I urge all of my colleagues to vote no on this Section 22 amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. And some of the comments that are being made here are quite interesting, saying that we're here to make it easier on people that violated the law. I'm here because I have a restaurant in my district that did not close, and they're now facing a felony and a fine that's about 7.5 times of what the statute calls for. And so if somebody's going to tell me that I'm here trying to give them special protection, I would like to let them know that's not the purpose at all. I'm here because I think it's only fair that when we set rules, we then follow the rules. But today it seems to be, besides a lot of preaching going on, it seems to be that what we want to do is we want to criticize people who want to stick up for the rights of people that are having a problem sticking up for themselves. And that's exactly what's happening. It's kind of interesting. We keep hearing about science and how we need to follow the science because the science tells everything. Well, if I remember right, when the science first came out, we were going to lose 74,000 people. But if we'd done everything right, we might get that down to 45. We just heard we've lost about 7,000. That's about 1/10 of what science said we would lose. If you take what science was said we would lose if we done everything right, that's about 1/6 of what we would have lost. So, you know, sometimes science is correct, sometimes it's not. But I guess I like to follow common sense. And to me, I think it's pretty common sense, instead of saying that we're protecting people and trying to change this to make it lesser for them, all I'm doing is say, let's treat the people fair. And let's use the laws we have in the books. And I think it's unfortunate when you have one individual that comes under executive powers and wants to change the rules and change the penalties, and I just don't think that's fair. So if we want to change the penalties, then let's do it legislatively and let's do it properly. If we don't do it that way, then let's follow what we have. And members, I'd really urge a green vote on this portion and the other portion of the amendment, because we have people out there that, yes, maybe they didn't follow the rules, but that don't mean that we should change the penalties in midstream and make it much tougher for them. These folks have put up with a lot. And a lot of the things that were done would not have needed to be done had the science been correct. So, folks, please vote green on this.
Further discussion on the divided amendment. Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to tell my colleagues a hilarious story that applies to this amendment. So, Senator Murphy brought up the alibi bar. Wasn't it hilarious for me to be watching CCO that night? And this is all verifiable. I'm just saying it out loud. My employee was one of the guys that they interviewed. And if you have any doubt, just watch the footage. You'll see his hat, PE Services. And he enjoyed a few drinks at the alibi bar. He happens to make about $25 an hour. And whether he got COVID or not, I really can't tell you that. But let's say he did. And let's say then I had to pay for him to be homesick for 10 days. You can do the math, it's pretty easy. 25 times 8 times 10 is $2,000. Let's say that my overhead's about 100%. That costs me really $4,000 to have him go out for a few drinks that night if he got COVID. Now, I have 32 employees. I have several of them who have made, I'll say it, dumb decisions about how they spend their time during COVID. And they got infected, and as a business owner, I can put dollars to that. I know exactly how much it has cost me to pay for my employees to be at home, whether they're sick or whether they're just isolating, but I have incurred that expense, and anybody wants to see my books, I'm happy to show you that. Plus, look up the video. I think you'll find it is indeed hilarious, especially our staff members, as I called in panic about what to do about that. So, Senator Murphy got up and talked about the fact that 7,600 people in Minnesota have died because of COVID. And I echo her remarks that every one of those counts for a lot. Senator Friends kind of teased me yesterday because I talked about innovative highway design, and I'm warning you, I'm going to talk about something related to that right now. For Senator Dames to get up and say the science says if we did this, we would do that or that or that, we can never prove what didn't happen. So let me tell you what I tell my students when I teach highway design. Science is involved in every double stripe on a two-lane road. Did you ever wonder, how do engineers know when it's safe to pass? You know how we know? Science. We do the geometry. And I'm going to really go off here. Vertical curvature is based on parabolic geometry. And if you want to know the sight distance, it's based on the speed you're driving, the height of the driver, all kinds of things. And we know, because of science, that in fact, if a car driving, let's say 55 miles an hour, wants to pass and they're on a vertical curve and there is a car that is of a specific height coming at them, they should be able to see if it's safe enough based on the laws of physics. That is science. But you know what I tell my students? If you pass in a no passing zone, there's not a 100% chance you're going to die. How many here have passed in a no passing zone? Lots of us.
Mr. President.
The science tells us
Senator
that the
Senjum,
law.
Hold on, Senator Johnson. Senator Senjum, for what reason do you rise?
Mr. President, the amendment deals with a penalty and whether or not we reduce a penalty down to $1,000. That ought to be the debate.
Members, just a reminder, please limit the discussion to the question before the body. Right now, we are on section 1.1 to 1.15 of the divided amendment. Senator Johnson Stewart.
Mr. President, I'm happy to do that, and I encourage my other colleagues to do the same. But again, we cannot disprove what doesn't happen, whether we're talking about highway deaths or COVID deaths, and that's why we have to make responsible decisions. Just remember, though, I did in fact pay $4,000 for my dumbass employee to go to that bar that night. Thank you.
Further discussion.
Sorry, I swore.
Further discussion on the divided amendment. Senator Matthews.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And I won't go into all of the, it's funny hearing it again where one side likes to insist all the science is on our side. I am science, like Dr. Fauci just alluded to. But aside from that, people have seen right through that, and they have for months. But let's talk about the law, Mr. President. I'll make it really easy for you, members. I have Minnesota Statutes 2020, volume number 1. If you open up to page number 318, you will arrive at statute 12.45, the penalty section for emergency powers. And let me read to you what current law says, because we've heard this argument. It's funny, the colleagues on the other side of the aisle are literally making our argument for us, and you're seeing it exactly backwards. Here's what the law says today, Mr. President and members. Chapter 12.45, violations, penalties. Unless a different penalty or punishment is specifically prescribed, meaning prescribed in law, a person who willfully violates a provision of this chapter or a rule or order having the force and effect of law issued under authority of this chapter is guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction must be punished by a fine not to exceed $1,000 or by imprisonment for not more than 90 days. The amendment that you have before you, the first part of this divided amendment, is that no penalty shall be greater than a misdemeanor and a fine not to exceed $1,000, which is exactly what Chapter 12.45 says right now. We had a governor that decided to send people all over the state to issue felonies, to issue fines of $5,000, $7,000, I've heard $10,000 fines and penalties, and not upon conviction, just upon issuance of a citation. Here it is, pay the fine, don't care that it's going to sink you and completely do you in for what the pandemic and the executive orders didn't do. Here's the penalty that's going to do you in. So who didn't follow the law? Governor Walz and his administration is the one who violated the law in Chapter 12.45, page 318. If you want to follow the law, members, vote green on the amendment. If you want to keep this lawlessness that we've seen from this administration, vote red.
Further discussion on the divided amendment, Senator Limmer. Senator Marty.
Mr. President, thank you. Senator Matthews, I appreciate your reading 12.45. It says, you added 2 words to it, if I recall. You said something about how, unless otherwise prescribed, and then you said, that means it's in the law. And in the law, also Chapter 12.32, the governor's orders and rules affect. 12.32, orders and rules promulgated by the governor under authority of Section 12.21, sub 3, clause 1, when approved by the executive council and filed with the office, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, during a peacetime emergency, et cetera, have the full force and effect of law. The governor, under this authority that we as a legislature have given the governor, has the ability to issue executive orders. And as the section you read points out, that they are limited to misdemeanor penalties unless otherwise prescribed. And if you read the executive orders, I just pulled up one randomly. It talks about how a worker who willfully violates this executive order is guilty of a misdemeanor, et cetera. Business owner manager who requires or encourages any of their employees, et cetera, to violate this executive order is guilty of a gross misdemeanor, and they spell out the penalties, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, we as the legislature have given the governor the authority to do this, and you don't like that, and this amendment would change this retroactively. But to say that the governor violated the law is false, period.
Members, just so everyone's clear, Senator Marty has called for the A6 amendment to be divided. So we are on section 1.1, we're on lines 1.1 to 1.15. That's what we're voting on. A roll call has been requested. The secretary will take the roll. Any members not in the chamber, please come vote. I'll call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes yes.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Fateh votes no.
Fateh votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Franzen votes no.
Franzen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes no.
Torres Ray votes no. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abler votes aye.
Abler votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Duckworth votes aye.
Duckworth votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmic votes aye.
Osmic votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Pratt votes aye.
Pratt votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rude votes aye.
Rude votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Westrom votes aye.
Westrom votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Utke votes aye.
Utke votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 38 ayes and 29 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Members, the Secretary will state the portion of the amendment that we are on now.
The amendment before the Senate will be a Gazelka motion, lines 1 point, of Amendment A1, 1.1 and 1.2, as well as 1.616 through 1.23 of the A6 amendment.
Senator Jasinski.
Mr. President, request roll call.
Roll call will be granted. Any further discussion on the second section of the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I'm generally a very practical person. When I vote, I think about the actual effect of the decisions that we make on my neighbors. That's the beginning and the end of the decisions that I make. And I'll be totally candid at this point, looking at this next issue that we're addressing, I'm still considering how I'm going to vote. But I do have one question if Senator Gazelka will yield.
Senator Gazelka will yield for a question. He will yield. Senator Putnam.
Senator Gazelka, it's my understanding that we have on the table basically $41 million in money that will help children in our districts have access to food. Is the presumption of this decision that we don't need that money?
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I think about this issue and the $18 billion of extra money that has come from the government with all the different strings, this is one where I think it's time that we take away the emergency powers. Like, it's either 15 or 16 because it keeps changing. States are saying it's time to get rid of these. We should not be hanging on to these. So it's the bigger issue that emergency powers allow the government to have broad sweeping powers that we are saying those are over, and it really doesn't matter if there's more strings attached money that come with that.
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that answer, Senator Gazelka. I guess I'm still where I was before I asked the question. And clearly there is some concern of principle that we're talking about, but to me the principle of feeding hungry children is awfully important too. And so in my mind, that access to that money, even if there was $18 billion that have already come here, 40 million more to help feed kids is worth it. And I think is pretty important. And I can't look at the children in my district and say that I made a decision that didn't consider whether or not they could eat. That's a pretty important principle too. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, Senator Gazelka.
I guarantee you that we are going to feed the starving children in Minnesota, whether there's this resource or not. And I will tell you that we tried to find some agreement to allow the governor to have other powers related to that. We could not get to that agreement, so that is why we're pushing forward and saying it's time for these powers to end so that we're on equal footing with the governor, just like many other states are doing right now, Democrats and Republicans.
All right, members, the question before the body is Section 23 of the A6 Amendment. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Any members not in the chamber, please come vote. I'll call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes yes.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Fateh votes no.
Fateh votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Franzen votes no.
Franzen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes no.
Torres Ray votes no. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abler votes aye.
Abler votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Duckworth votes aye.
Duckworth votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmick votes aye.
Osmick votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Pratt votes aye.
Pratt votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rude votes aye.
Rude votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Utke votes aye.
Utke votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Westrom votes aye.
Westrom votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 37 ayes and 30 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. We are on Senate File 2 as amended. Further discussion on the bill. Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. First, I'd like to thank Senator Kiffmeyer for all her hard work on this bill, and there's a lot of really good things in this bill. And so thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, and thank you to your team and to the other folks that were on the working group that helped get this across the finish line. First, I'd like to point out one piece in the bill that's very important to folks in central Minnesota and folks in southwestern Minnesota, and that's the funding for the Veterans Cemetery. The federal funding has came through, and now with the state putting the funding in here, the match that was needed, this will be going ahead. The county has now turned the property over to the state so that this process can go forward. This has been being worked on for over 10 to 12 years. I can remember as a county commissioner, this is one of the things that I was working on back in 2008 and 9. So very important to see this, very important for that part of the state of Minnesota. The other thing is I'd certainly like to thank Senator Kiffmeyer and her team for getting money in for the Veterans Home in Montevideo. I think it's very important that that part of the state has a veterans home so that our veterans can go to a home and have their friends and relatives that are close for visitation and just be in the area of the state to where they are in. And certainly I think this is one way of thanking the veterans for the service. The other piece of it I'd really like to thank the folks for is the Veterans Restorative Justice Program. I think that that's a very important program. I'm excited to see how that's going to work. I think it'll work very well. I've seen that program work at the county level with different groups, and so thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, and thank you to your team for putting these items in there. I think they're very important not only to our veterans, but to the areas they serve, so thank you.
The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate file number 2.
Mr. President,
Senator Marty for
before third reading,
the Secretary is giving the bill its third reading, Senator Marty.
before the Secretary gives the third reading, I ask to be recognized.
Okay, Senator Marty.
Thank you. Mr. President, I have two issues, one of which I just wanted to comment briefly, Senator Gazelka, in response to Senator Putnam's question about what we're going to do if we would lose that $40 million or whatever in food stamp funding and so on. And you said to us that you would make sure we take care of hungry people in this state. And when we have about 1 in 10 families that are food insecure, a lot of them on a regular basis not having enough food, I guess I'm wondering when and where we're going to do that. And it's a very nice commitment to say we're going to take care of people who are hungry, but we're not doing a very good job. And I guess if Senator Gazelka would yield, I'd just be curious if there's any plan to do more to help make up for that, because I can point you to people who go to bed hungry if you need, but there are plenty of people in this state who struggle.
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Marty, what I would say is Minnesota right now is one of the most generous states, if not the most generous state, in our welfare benefits to those that are hungry and needy. And I think we are proud of that as it fits within the total package of resources that we have. And so it's acknowledging and underlining the fact that Minnesota has very, very, very generous benefits in comparison to the rest of the 50 states who, as a whole, our country as a whole, is very, very generous compared to the other countries around the world. And so we absolutely care about that. In addition to our own people, we are a people that is very generous in our donations that are charitable, that are not from the state, not from the government, both here in Minnesota and also the United States, and what we do as a country to help other states. And that's, in the context of that, is why I made that answer.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gazelka, I think when you say we're far more generous than any other state, I would challenge that, and I would say perhaps we are less hurtful and stingy than other states in some of this. But if you talk to a parent who doesn't know how they're going to put food on the table for their kids, and you say, but we're so generous to you, that rings very hollow. And I'm sure you, like I, and all of us in here care very deeply about our kids and about our families. But people who don't have enough, those kids didn't do anything to deserve a lack of a good diet. You can say we do so much. When somebody doesn't have enough money for food, shelter, our housing crisis we haven't done very well with either. You can say we're so generous. But I hope you realize that may sound good here, but in those homes, it doesn't help. So I'll let it go at that, but I just think that if we should lose that $40 million in federal funding, that is a shame, and that the people who benefit from it would really care about that. Mr. President, I had another issue I wanted to address, and that relates to the budget for the Attorney General's office. I believe the bill has a bottom line left on it from the money that was given by, that was set aside by the leadership of $5 million left unspent. And yet in the Attorney General's office, their request for more criminal prosecutors was denied by the Senate. The Senate rejected it. And that would have fit within the target. That was less, it was 3.6 million, I believe. And that money is pretty urgently needed. And I really have some question, and Senator Kiffmeyer, if you would yield, I have a question or two for you.
Senator Kiffmeyer will yield. Senator Marty.
Mr. President, Senator Kiffmeyer, there is, I believe, a bottom line you left on the bill, and this request you left unfunded here. Could you explain the rationale for saying the Attorney General should not have more prosecutors?
Bless you. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Marty. Well, there was a bit of a disagreement, Senator Marty, in regards to the best use of that money. I felt it would be best used for election equipment for our local units of government in regards to their elections. The House wanted to go to the Attorney General to spend money in that way. So with our disagreement, we ended up not spending it at all. But my preference would have been for election equipment as a by far more important need for that resource. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. But the bottom line is you left $5 million on the bottom line, and you would have preferred that money go to some other purpose, as you pointed out. But since the money wasn't being spent for that other purpose, why couldn't it go to the prosecutors there? When under former Attorney General 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were 12 full-time criminal prosecutors in the Attorney General's office. When Attorney General Ellison took office, there was one criminal prosecutor down from 12. And he made it clear from the beginning that was a strong priority of his. He's been in office several years. He's asked for it several times. And the Senate has rejected that. And the reason I have a problem with this is because we have a lot of counties, especially rural counties, where there are part-time county attorneys. They don't have the staff to prosecute serious, complex cases. Things like murder cases or sexual assaults. They don't have the expertise, and they turn to the Attorney General's office all the time. And the Attorney General's office is the biggest obstacle to helping prosecute those very serious crimes, the ones the county attorneys say they don't have the staff or the resources or the training for. They turn to the Attorney General's office. And I've heard from Attorney General's office, and I'm distributing a letter from the County Attorneys Association in which they're strongly asking for this funding. And the Attorney General's office has, with its very limited funding, the funding to provide for one full-time prosecutor. They've tried to handle these cases. They've handled very successfully the prosecution of former Officer Chauvin. They handled it very successfully, but they were reduced to begging for pro bono attorneys from the private sector and from elsewhere to fill in the gap because our Attorney General's office doesn't have the funds to prosecute. And Senator Kiffmeyer, I understand you would have rather done other things with it, but in the end, the money is still there. The needs for the prosecution are still there, and they're unmet. And I'm wondering, Mr. President, Senator Kiffmeyer, if you'll yield one more time.
Senator Kiffmeyer will yield. Senator Marty.
When Can the Attorney General get these prosecutors that they need and that I think the local county attorneys around the state say they need?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Marty, for that question. Well, first of all, let's stand up for the county attorneys who are very knowledgeable, very professional, very capable. And on occasion here, if the Attorney General would quit taking cases from them that they are quite capable of handling and want to handle, that would leave the Attorney General with a little room to spare here. So part of it is the choice of the current Attorney General. I want to remind you that it was under the former Attorney General, Mike Hatch, who let go and decided not to go in that direction of prosecuting criminal crimes and taking them up into his office. It was a decision he made as an Attorney General, and his choice was instead to focus on consumer protection. Every Attorney General has an opportunity to take the staff of their office and make some of those discretionary decisions. So if the Attorney General wants to manage all of his staff, that is certainly at his discretion, but he also has very capable county attorneys who have very willingly helped each other, worked with each other, have expertise. I mean, we're acting as though these county attorneys are incapable or unknowledgeable, and that is just so not true, and such a disservice to our county attorneys to treat them in this way. While they appreciate some of the advice and recommendations of the Attorney General's office, that has been there before and it should continue to be there. Under the current funding, the Attorney General has that ability to do that. But I think we need to respect our county attorneys and do that. And when there is a lack of agreement on how to spend the money, then it just is a lack of agreement. It doesn't mean that now it's open for any one house to dictate to what they want to do. And certainly that is the nature of negotiations. But our county attorneys are capable, competent, qualified, work together, and the Attorney General can also spend his resources, whether it's consumer protection or criminal enforcement. And we did give the Attorney General 2/3 of what the new money he asked for. 2/3 the Attorney General got. Somehow that's still not enough for him to manage his own office. I think that is something that needs to be focused on, needs to be directed upon, and certainly allow our county attorneys to do the capable, qualified work that they do without taking it up into the Attorney General's office when it is not necessary. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the Senate File 2 as amended. Senator Frantz.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Marty, for your comments, and thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer, for listing the county attorney's attributes as including knowledgeable, capable, and professional. That's why I'm so impressed with the letter we have here, January 15th, 2021, from the Minnesota Counties Attorneys Association saying, please pass this $1.8 million per year so we can get these prosecutors. Members, as a greater Minnesota legislator, here's what happens. The county attorneys are not always equipped to handle first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct cases, and they ask the Attorney General, these are the knowledgeable, professional, capable county attorneys, can the Attorney General please help us with this prosecution? It's not unusual for a rural county like Nicollet County, where I live, to have a very limited number of prosecutors, and they need the help. They're always working hard, but they're not always equipped to handle those types of cases. The Attorney General has been telling these rural county attorneys on occasion, no, we cannot. We do not have the resources. And as Senator Marty pointed out, at one time, the Attorney General's office had 12 full-time equivalent attorneys helping with criminal prosecutions. The word crime seems to ring through here, as I'm assuming we all agree that we would want criminals to be successfully prosecuted, and the Attorney General is very well equipped. Imagine a county attorney who says, I've got a first-degree murder case here, I want the Attorney General to help me. They notify the Attorney General, and the Attorney General says, no, our request was not funded, despite support from the other body and from the governor, and money being available on the bottom line. How much help is the Attorney General's office to our greater Minnesota counties? Here's a list of some of the cases that the Attorney General participated in, not only bringing expertise, because they are also capable, professional, and knowledgeable, but they will help these greater Minnesota counties. Just in 2019, Carleton County, first-degree murder. Roseau County, second-degree assault. Fillmore County, second-degree murder. Freeborn County, first-degree murder. Becker County, second-degree manslaughter. Pennington County, first-degree murder. Clearwater County, second-degree murder. Todd County, first-degree murder. Clearwater County, first-degree criminal sexual conduct. Aitkin County, second-degree murder. I could read the list from 2020 and 2021, but I think you get the idea. This is money well spent. This is taxpayer money that helps put criminals in jail. And with money left on the bottom line, I think the question for us is, why would we not help greater Minnesota county attorneys when they need help prosecuting criminals? Why would we tell the Attorney General's office? Why would we tell the people of Minnesota, never mind the victims' families of these crimes, I'm sorry, we're not going to bring the resources to bear to give you the best possible prosecution. That's why this lapse in the state government bill should have been funded, and hope we will continue that discussion as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the bill as amended. Senator Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleague from Mankato did a great job explaining the kind of issue that we're facing here by not funding the Attorney General's request. I guess I'm struggling here with, we just voted on an amendment that let people flagrantly break the law and not be held accountable. And now we're not even going to fund prosecutors predominantly to help greater Minnesota counties deal with some very serious crimes. As it's been stated on the floor, these county attorneys who, of course, and their deputies and their assistants are well-skilled legal scholars, some of the best. But when they have one or two people in an office and you get a first-degree murder case, there goes your whole, that's your whole time. You can't deal with any other, child protection cases. You can't deal with juvenile cases, which, by the way, county attorneys handle. It's very frustrating here to hear the rhetoric of being, tough on crime and law and order, and then we're not even funding prosecutors that are requested by the Attorney General to help smaller offices around the state. And it's just so important that Minnesotans know that these are needed. These are needed. The Attorney General's had to decline cases because they do not have the decline cases from greater Minnesota counties because they don't have the staff, and then one of the other suburban counties has to pick up the case because they need help. They literally don't have the equipment, and they don't have the time and ability to commit to a major first-degree murder trial. So this is not a wise choice in this bill to not fund the Attorney General's request that will help prosecute criminals in greater Minnesota.
The Secretary will give the
Mr.
bill its
President.
third reading.
Mr. President, before third reading.
Senator Marty?
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, I wanted to keep talking about this criminal prosecution issue. When Senator Friends mentioned that, again, Majority Leader Gazelka, I think 3 of them, a first-degree murder, a second-degree murder, were in Todd County, and I think also in your district, Morrison County, a second-degree murder. Attorney General, to clarify something Senator Kiffmeyer was saying a few minutes ago, she made it sound like the Attorney General steps in and takes over the cases against the will of these qualified, competent county attorneys. The Attorney General has no authority to take over a case. They only are allowed to step in when they're asked to do so by the county attorney. That's why I handed out the letter where the attorneys are saying, please, we need the funding. We need the help. They're good attorneys, and like good attorneys, they know what they're able to handle with the resources they have and so on. So I'm really troubled by the hollow-sounding, we care about law and order, we care about prosecuting people, we care about this, but we don't want to give the Attorney General any funds to do this. even though he's been saying for 3 years, one's not enough, one prosecutor's not enough, when the office historically had 12. I don't get the frugality here where we're going to put money on the bottom line, but we're not going to even prosecute these cases. And unfortunately, under our Senate rules, the fact that there's $5 million there, we're not allowed to offer an amendment on the floor that would take it from that surplus that was left on the bottom line. We can't propose an amendment there. I've opposed those rules since they were first adopted by the Senate many years ago. I still think they interfere with the ability of the Senate to make wise choices. But, Mr. President, I do have the A8 amendment at the desk.
Senator Marty offers the A8 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Marty moves to amend Senate File Number 2 as follows, page 62, after line 31. Insert, this is the A8 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Marty.
Mr. President, because of our rules, I cannot take the money from the bottom line and put it in there because you can't appropriate money from, change the appropriation level. So this would simply take from the money from the federal funds that are being appropriated to the general fund. It would specify that some of that appropriation would go to cover this $3.6 million per biennium cost. And Mr. President, I urge your support for this. This would allow the Attorney General to get the funds. This isn't a thing we can do in many bills, but in this bill we do have that. And Mr. President, I ask for roll call and urge your support for this amendment. It would allow us to take funds that are intended to be used by our state to prosecute dangerous offenders. These first-degree murder crimes aren't just in the Twin Cities. They happen all over the place. And the Attorney General has the expertise to do that, but they don't have the staff to do it. They've been asking for it for 3 years. And the fact that some previous attorneys general may have let the criminal division slip, I think is a shame, because these county attorneys are excellent, as you and Senator Friends pointed out, but they do need help. They ask for help. They're asking for us to help them be able to have that help available. I urge your support.
A roll call will be granted. Discussion on the A8 amendment. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Did he call me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to raise an issue of germaneness and according to Rule 7.4.
Senator Kiffmeyer, it would not be a germaneness argument. I think you're, if you are raising a point of order under Rule 7.4, you're stating that the amendment is out of order because of Rule 7.4.
That's correct, Mr. President.
Okay. To your point of order, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in regards to this, we have an increase in appropriation from the federal fiscal funds without a corresponding decrease appropriation from the same fund. And these are quite technical issues that we have going on here. And so the effort to do so is against Rule 7.4. Thank you.
Mr. President, advice.
Senator Marty, advice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I've read the rule 7.4, and that's why this is something that wouldn't work in many bills. But in this case, we have the state fiscal recovery funds, which are being appropriated to the state. And here we would be simply saying of that appropriation, we're going to put $3.6 million into this purpose. So we're not changing the amount we're taking from the federal funds. We're not changing the amount in the state funds. We're not appropriating money from the state fund. We're appropriating it from that, appropriate from the federal funds coming in. So it doesn't violate those provisions of 7.4.
Further advice, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Marty please yield?
Senator Marty will yield. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Marty, according to the A8 amendment, does the Attorney General receive an increase in his net appropriation from your amendment?
Senator Marty.
Mr. President, this would take money from the appropriation that's already being appropriated. We're just changing where the appropriation's going from the federal state fiscal recovery funds. We're just reallocating of the 633. We're taking 3.6 out of that and changing it from, instead of from the general fund to there. We're not changing any of the, we're not appropriating money from the general fund.
Mr. President.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, according to 7.1, Mr. President and members, an amendment of the omnibus appropriation bill is out of order if, number one, there's an increased net appropriation from a fund for a fiscal biennium. And that is exactly what Senator Marty said. There would be a net increase in the appropriation to the Attorney General.
Mr. President.
Marty, I have my ruling. I'm ready. I rule that the point of order is well taken and the amendment is out of order.
Mr. President, I'd like to appeal the ruling of the chair.
Senator Marty appeals
ask for roll call.
The ruling of the president and asks for roll call. The question before the body is, shall the decision of the president be the judgment of the Senate? A green vote is in favor of the judgment of the president, and a red vote is against the judgment of the president. The secretary will take the roll. Any members not in the chamber, please come vote. I'll call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abler votes aye.
Abler votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Duckworth votes aye.
Duckworth votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Dames votes aye.
Dames votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Housley votes aye.
Housley votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmick votes aye.
Osmick votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Pratt votes aye.
Pratt votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rude votes aye.
Rude votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Udke votes aye.
Udke votes aye. Senator Jasinski. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes no.
Eakin votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Fateh votes no.
Fateh votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes no.
Torres Ray votes no.
Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Western votes aye.
Western votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Franzen votes no.
Franzen votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 37 ayes and 30 nays, the judgment of the President is sustained. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 2, a bill for an act relating to state government operations appropriating money.
Third reading. Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I came in today all excited to vote for this bill because it is including the Market Buck program, which is a program that matches SNAP benefits for people that go to farmers markets. We had a conversation about this earlier in the Ag bill. Like I said, I was all excited to vote for this bill. Unfortunately, I'm rethinking that with the amendment that was added. The businesses in my district were also hurt by COVID and shutdowns. But as far as I know, they followed the law. So what message does that send to them? What message does this amendment send to them? They followed the law, and others didn't. So I have just concerns about that. Second, during that conversation, we talked about Minnesota's getting so much money from the federal government. We have more money that, we don't know what to do with. But Minnesota is one of only 8 states in the nation in 2018 with a negative balance of payments from the federal government. All told, Minnesota paid $725 million more to federal coffers than what we get back from the federal government. $725 million more. Adjusted for population, the balance of payments ranks 43rd in the nation. So when we can get federal dollars, and we can use federal dollars to help feed people, I think that's a good thing. I think that is something that we need to seriously consider. It was also mentioned that we are generous, and I agree, we are generous. We reach out to help each other, we want to help each other, we want to help each other do good. And that includes feeding people. And that gets me back to the Market Bucks program. I am very pleased that this is included in. I had mentioned earlier that this program helps people all across the state. It is used in about several farmers markets, but it is available in 95 farmers markets across the state, from Albert Lee and Bagley to Winona. But part of that conversation, it came up that there seems to be a lot of the money from this program goes to Minneapolis and St. Paul and the farmers markets in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The farmers market at downtown St. Paul is actually a destination site. I know a lot of people go there, they make an event of it. They know that farmers from all over the state are there. They know they can get a wide variety of produce. That's at the downtown St. Paul, the Minneapolis downtown, the Lindell Avenue. So I went and looked at the vendors, because I've gone to the Minneapolis and St. Paul one, and I know there are vendors from all over the state. So I just want to point out to everybody that this Market Bucks programs helps people from all over the state, but it also helps farmers from all over the state. There's farmers from Farmington in Senator Duckworth's district, from Rogers in Senator Limmer's district, from Wanamingo and Zumbrota in Senator Goggins' district, Northfield and several from Northfield in Senator Draheim's district. There's Grillin' Meats, a very nice lady that handles her own produce from Avon, Minnesota in Senator Howe's district. There's farmers from Jordan in Senator Pratt's district, from Chatfield in President Miller's district, come to the St. Paul Farmers Market. They come from all over the state. So I just want to point that out, that this program helps families and farmers all across the state. It is a good program. I am glad we are including it. I'm just disappointed in the additional amendment to the bill. So I encourage people to vote no on that because of that amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill? Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Thank you for a vigorous debate that we have here on the Senate floor. Appreciate it very much. Again, I thank my staff. And want to mention, though, that the market bucks is in this bill. There's been a bit of controversy about that, so I just want to be sure that before we leave the floor here today, that it is well known that the market bucks are in this bill and taken care of wherever they may come shopping from. And so, Mr. President, members, thank you very much, and I would ask for a yes vote on Senate File 2. Thank you.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. For the spirited debate, I don't want that to end here as we're looking forward to the future related to emergency powers and what do we do about them, what did we learn from them. I think that's a very, very important topic, not just now ending, but also what is the future and how do we do that. And as I mentioned, that's 300 bills, Democrats, Republicans across the country grappling with how do we do this better. And so I'll leave that for now. We had a robust debate there. I do want to focus on many of the veterans issues. Senator Lang did a great job on the vets' restorative justice. There was really bipartisan work, and Senator Kiffmeyer made sure that those 3 vet homes were in here with funding now and into the future. That's in Bemidji, Montevideo, and Preston. Senator Kiffmeyer also made sure that the Vets Cemetery in Redwood Falls was funded. Those were big things. Sometimes they get left out or sometimes they don't get fully answered, and Senator Kiffmeyer made sure that those things were in there. So between Senator Lang and Senator Kiffmeyer, the veterans part of this bill is really, really strong. And then I think there is one election reform thing that we could come to an agreement on. The use of the drop boxes, without a doubt, there can be the potential that they're not secure. And so they came to an agreement on some security issues related to the drop boxes. A number of things fell off to the sides. We wanted photo ID for voting. We wanted provisional ballots reform like all of the other states but a handful. We didn't get those. We wanted those. The other side, the Democrat side, wanted to allow felons to have more opportunities to vote in their transition. They wanted driver's license for illegal immigrants. Those fell off to the sides. Those are issues I don't think they're going to go away, but there was strong passion on those, and they just didn't happen on either side of that. But the fact that we did acknowledge and look at some form of election reform, I think, is good. The drop boxes is something new, and if we don't watch that, that could be a problem if we're not actually making sure there's security there. So with that, members, I would encourage you to vote for this bill. It goes to the House, and from there it would eventually go to the governor. Thank you.
Members, we're on final passage of Senate File 2. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Any members not in the chamber, please come vote. Call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Fateh votes no.
Fateh votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Franzen votes no.
Franzen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Klein votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes no.
Torres Ray votes no. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abler votes aye.
Abler votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Duckworth votes aye.
Duckworth votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes no.
Goggin votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmic votes no.
Osmic votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Pratt votes aye.
Pratt votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Westrom votes aye.
Westrom votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Udke votes aye.
Utke votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Housley votes aye.
Housley votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Dames votes aye.
Dames votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Stand by 1 second.
All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 40 ayes and 26 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we'll take up messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following Senate file herewith return Senate file number 20, a bill for an act relating to state government appropriating money for the environment.
There's no action required on that message. Next, we'll move to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interest. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Finance Committee will have a hearing tomorrow on the HHS bill at 10 o'clock in room 123 Capitol. Thank you.
Any other announcements of Senate interest? Without objection, Senator Rude will be excused from today's session from 3:50 p.m. to the end of session. Any announcements of Senate interest? Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until Saturday, June 26th at 1 p.m.
Senator Gazelka moves that the Senate do now adjourn until Saturday, June 26th at 1 p.m. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is adjourned.